This is the fifth full budget that the National Assembly or the Minister will be tabling. Talk to us about your predictions. We've seen last year a budget of $84 billion that was spent. What is likely to change come tomorrow?
Thank you very much for that question. In fact, maybe first of all, let me just put it in context. So when we speak of the budget is a most important piece of document in the nation, in the sense that this is a document that carries the national aspirations, in as much as it talks about economy, finance, but it also carries in the political statement, the social statement, and so each and everyone, in the spirit of inclusiveness, everyone is expecting something, to hear some good news from it. We are talking about the youth who are suffering from high unemployment. We are talking about the elderly whose vulnerability has escalated. We are talking about the men and women on the street. Everyone is looking forward to hear what the minister is going to say, what the minister will say will change the situation. So now looking back the past 12 months, what do we foresee different? In fact, the budget that we are going to see tomorrow was already sort of draft or roughly tabled or budgeted 3 years ago, because we're using the medium-term expenditure framework where the budget is planned 3 years in advance. So if one looks at last year's budget or even the year after, you can already have an idea of where the direction is going. So to answer your question, we expect an expansionary budget in the sense that we are going to see a bigger number of the budget compared to last year, and this is because in line with the medium-term expenditure framework of an incremental expansion to the budget to accommodate for new challenges, new projects, we expect to see that. And what we also expect to see is a continuation of the framework, in the sense that the priority areas that were prioritized a few years ago will continue to still receive the highest priority. We are talking about the budget being a socially oriented budget in the sense that it will address more social issues compared to economic issues, and this will be seen when one looks at the operational budget versus the capital budget component of this. So yes, we expect to see these things because they were already clear in the previous budget that were tabled.
Now, when we look at the priority areas, as you've mentioned, some we're looking at Ministry of Education, a lot of budget expenditure going to education, going to health, going to defense. This year is election year. What are your predictions this coming year?
Yes, like I've said, it's going to be an expansionary year in the sense that there will be increments in those key areas, and the key areas are those that are in the social sector. Remember, our budget is categorized in many, in like 5 categories. We talk about social sector, we talk about economic sector, we talk about administrative sector, we talk about infrastructure, we talk about economic sector. So when you look at the previous budget, we have seen that the social sector, which is the sector which consists of ministries of education, ministry of health, ministry of gender, those ministries that speak to directly social needs, have received the lion's share in the past. And because the conditions that necessitated those allotment have not changed, one can clearly, or one can easily and safely say that we are going to see a continuation. Why am I saying so? We are speaking about the old age grants, which we have seen been increased over the past. This is because the vulnerabilities of those group of people have continued to worsen. And so because they have continued to worsen, it is very, very wise and most appropriate to respond with an increase. And saying so, we have just witnessed one of Namibia's most tragic moments in our history. But before that, the late president have indicated his wish to see an increment in the old age pension. He realized the vulnerabilities that need to be closed. And so when one looks at this from a vantage point, you can clearly see that those ministries that you mentioned, which makes up the social sector, will continue to receive the lion's share.
Now, let's talk about the state of our borrowing and government debt. They often criticism, or there has been criticism around our government debt. It is growing. Can we really afford to expand, to have an expansionary budget?
Yes, the question really is not as to whether we can afford. The question is to how wise are we using this money that we are borrowing? We need to use it wise so that it gives us a pedestal to create more opportunities for us to generate income and be able to repay back this money. Now, when we look at where we are right now, where we are saying the portion of our GDP that is locked in debt, which they call the GDP to debt to GDP ratio, which is hovering between 60 to 70%, is quite huge. It's quite huge in the sense that a large amount of our GDP is already locked in a debt. Whether our economy will grow, portion of that will go to the debt. So it's already locked in. What we need to ask ourselves is to say, how much are we doing in terms of expanding the economy so that we open it up, we diversify so that we have more sources of revenue to be able to generate enough and be able to pay back that money. So far, you mentioned earlier on that last year that Minister tabled 84 billion somewhere there budget. Yes, indeed. But remember, a large sum of that, about 12 billion, was already a service cost of the debt. It's not spent here in Namibia. We are paying back where we borrowed the money. So that large chunk of money, if it can be rerouted to Namibia, it could make a difference. So yes, it's a concern. The late president, on many occasions, has also expressed that concern to say that we need to streamline so that we bring down this debt stock. The IMF, which is one of the reputable institutions that oversees economic activities all over the world, they have also highlighted to say that the rate at which we are growing our debt is concerning, because as we grow the debt, we are not showing how we are going to repay this, because the areas that we are opening up are not really seemingly aligned to the areas that we can help, we can invest and help repay this money.
Let's look at the development budget. Are we spending enough, especially compared to the current expenditure?
Okay, so when we speak about development budget, maybe we should also try to put in context, as I've alluded to it earlier. When we have our budget, the budget is broken down in two parts. There is the operational component and the development component. The development component, which we normally refer to as the development budget, is where we budget money for infrastructure, for investment that will grow the economy. When one looks at these two, we see, and we have seen in the past, that the amount that is going to development, to investment, is very, very little compared to what is going to operation. The operational part of the budget, which is the consumption part, is to pay for salaries, is to pay for consumable. It's much, much bigger. Now, how sustainable is this? Well, it's not really that sustainable, because we need to develop, we need to channel funds into areas that is going to plow back. And we are not seeing that. And it's a worrisome, it's a concerning, because we need to plow back so that we have a payback. We see the return on investment, and it's a worrisome concern.
Now, looking at the operational expenditure, as you've mentioned, we talk about the salaries, the civil servant wage bill, which is it's constantly going up. What can be done to reduce this wage bill, and what seems to be sort of the growing, despite government talking about reducing it? Government is saying let's reduce it, but what can be done?
Yes, it's a very difficult question to address, and there's no straight answer. Why am I saying that? The structure of our civil service is deeply rooted into the structure of the economy. Government being the largest employer, at some point they have no choice but to employ. Now that they have already employed, the labor laws tells you cannot just fire, or you cannot just stop people's salary from growing. What then must you do? That's when you look at other options, exogenous factors outside of the model. I am talking about looking at areas where you can find leverage points for growth. For example, instead of employing more people into the government structure, why can't the government support the private sector so that they can open up new avenues and absorb these people that are already in that wants to come in, and those that are already in the sector, instead of them being kept, there must be other alternatives from which they can get some other benefits. So like I've said, it's not a straightforward answer, because remember, especially this year, which is an election year, you don't want to temper on people's salaries, because you are going to make people very angry, and it's going to affect the outcome at the end of the day. So for this year, really, to talk about not suspending, to talk about reducing the wage bill, it might really be a little bit too close to comfort, because we know as an election year, people must be happy. and you don't want to make people be worried about their salaries. That is one. Number two, the government has got a responsibility to provide conducive environment for private sector to open up, because what we need is new industries that will create new jobs, not industry that will take the same old jobs because they are already overburdened. So to answer your question, really there's no straight answer, but there are avenues and options that government can pursue. But obviously this cannot be done in one budget, because this budget, remember, is coming from 3 years ago. What will change is as a result of the new events. And that's why government go around the country for consultation to see if things have changed, what have changed, so that they can adjust the budget. But to really expect this current budget to address the issue of civil wage bill, it might be a little bit too much to ask.
All right, well, Mr. Likukela, as we conclude, perhaps some final remarks before we conclude for tomorrow's budget expectations?
Well, a budget is a national document. And in as much as most people, it used to catch them off guard. And my message is that we need to be involved so that our needs are included, are considered, especially the youth that are at the rough end of the stick. Tomorrow when the minister will table the budget, let's take time to reflect on it and see how much it is addressing our need. An effective budget is one budget that is responsive to the needs on the ground. And right now, if this budget is to address the issue of unemployment, let's see how much of the budget is allocated to programs that speaks to unemployment, especially for youth unemployment. And youth must be involved by looking at this budget so that the next round we see our needs being addressed even more. And sometimes we also want to react after the budget has been tabled. It could be a little bit too late. But the point I'm trying to say is that because this is a citizen's document, it's a national document, it belongs to us. Let's find avenues to find our feet in there. The same goes for business people. So let's see what the budget has for us as business people so that we can optimize and take advantage of those opportunities. Thank you so much.